So hello, we are here at Southern Oregon University with an exciting artist and printmaker. I'm going to share my screen. Already feel like this is... We're here with Brad Ewing. Brad Ewing,
hello,
is a printer and visual artist working across many disciplines, including painting, collage, and printmaking. Brad says of his practice, I'm constantly trying to understand the properties of color as viewed in nature, in still photographs, and in the shifting view in front of my eyes. Ewing's work has been shown in New York, at International Print Center, New York, Lower East Side Print Shop, Dudene, the RISD Alumni Biennial, and in Washington and Seattle art museums. Ewing is the founder of Marginal Editions, a fine art press that prints and publishes artist editions. He's also a master printer for Grenfell Press. Ewing is also the co-founder of Plant House Gallery, a project space that exhibited published prints and emerging and established artists. Brad just recently had completed a show last January, in January, called 10 Marginal Years, which showed prints from the collection of the last 10 years of publishing. And that was an exciting moment. And
yeah,
as one of the more recent things, as we haven't been doing as much recently, I'm going to say that brings Brad to SOU to talk about his work. And so thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, excited. Love Oregon. Love the West Coast.
It's gorgeous. And apparently there's a lot going on. So let's see, Brad and I this on my way out here to Oregon, we created a tour. He and I were going to go on a tour across the United States and speak at different colleges, Oberlin and Cleveland Institute, and with some printmaker folks, and at University of Kansas. And we were going to give this talk on our way across the country about our collaborations and about printmaking and print philosophy and Brad's work and 10 Marginal Years with Marginal Editions. And that was scheduled to kick off on March 14th this year. And we realized somewhere around March 9th or 10th that it probably wasn't going to happen due to the virus. So this comes as this is really great that we're able to do this talk today about your work and focus more on your life, work, and Marginal Editions. But we had talked about starting our talk with this quote by artist Alan Frame, who is faculty at Pratt Institute, and we both really like this quote because there's a lot of mystique around the art world and the idea that we don't have a lot of agency when it comes to our own commercial success or our own maneuvering in the markets or or whatever. But Alan states that it's really just about real relationships with people, and this is his actual quote from an interview he did.
Yeah, it's really telling too, because I mean, this is reading this, like getting through this entire quote, it definitely leads you down the path of kind of the way that we've resolve to work together, which I love as like part of Grayson, part of your philosophy, and it really is truly the reason that we make every effort to try to get together, even as our trip was collapsing that was supposed to happen right before everything happened with COVID. We still made sure that we got the print finished and like kind of followed through with our mission of the entire trip, even though, and you know, and also this is actually a continuation of the actual trip, the fact that you know made it the rest of the way. It's like you carried the torch from New York for both of us.
Well, thanks for being here. So this is Brad. I don't know if you're at the Anderson Ranch.
Yeah, that picture's taken at Anderson Ranch when I had some, it was a class that I taught a silkscreen class in the summer, and they do allow you, once your class gets kind of underway, you have your own little bit of studio time, you know, and so this is me actually working on a screen for myself during a project we did. It was like a, I'm trying to think how, it was like a 8-day intensive, and including for our class, important also, again, like our talk today, it was a, we did an exchange portfolio in just a week. We tried to make sure we still had some exchange at the end of this. So this is me working on my print for the exchange.
And you're also wearing a t-shirt that was printed with oil-based work of registration pinholes for silkscreen.
It doesn't get nerdier than, yeah, like when you're wearing it as well.
And that was printed with a steamroller.
Yeah, we were one of those great days, and Scott probably remembers those days when we would have the steamroller come in and run over these 4-by-8 foot sheets of plywood that all the students would elaborately carve. And yeah, I had some fun with that too. I wouldn't say mine was very elaborate, but it was fun.
It was great. So you started off sort of in Seattle, right?
Yeah, I went to, my undergrad studies were in Seattle, and so I was out there, Seattle, Oregon area in the late 90s, and I went to a school called Cornish, right in Seattle, and had just a really fantastic letterpress teacher for the first time.
And this is Letterpress Intro.
Yeah, and this is the reason I inserted this, just sort of some reference. Even looking online, it was funny. This is technically, for anyone that's interested in letterpress, depending on the kind of press that you're working on, sometimes you need to do what's called a lockup, where you can see here on the screen, you have the type in there, there's even an image that's in there, and then there's these little pieces of wood that are locked up, holding it together. And so this is sort of a technically correct letterpress lockup. And this is just, once again, the shape of the wood that's holding the lead type in place. It forms this margin you see right around, just outside of the lead pieces you're seeing there. You see these pieces of wood that are more or less kind of jutting around. Mm-hmm. And again, it's just, for me, even the simplicity of that, those shapes, rectangles and squares, and their margins, was just kind of like a reference that I always go back to.
The margin as the point.
Right. And, you know, like, and so same thing, these are, it's almost like these things are presented to you. So these are, you know, I think it, weirdly, that quote that I had from, I don't even know how many years ago, is still fairly correct. This is this is like a cinematic moment in that movie, Paranoid Park, which is like a skateboarding movie. If you haven't seen it in a long time, or if you have seen it, it's a Gus Van Sant movie that I was really moved by, all these incredible moments of lens flare. And so, and same thing in All the President's Men and the Kelly Reichardt Old Joy movie. There's moments there where I've found myself kind of presented with these beautiful images, and I just started screen grabbing and doing simple things like that, and making my, like a library of my own kind of moment moments of images, like fleeting things that were there and gone.
I think of it a little bit as like unsung heroes. Does that?
Sure. I mean, it's funny now. To me, it seemed like at the time, this was before. I mean, now you see it on like fabricated for like Ford commercials and stuff, and it's become like a marketing tool or something. I wasn't aware of, like, it wasn't used like that for so long. It was purely the moment when light would pass through a lens and sort of, I mean, I don't actually get into the technical things that are happening with it, but the different shapes that are created by the type of lens that was used was just always fascinated me. And it was just a momentary thing and it was gone. So lots of people missed it. I was always watching for it. And same thing for this image here. This is All the President's Men. This inspired me to do a whole group of silkscreen prints when I went to RISD for grad school, and I started doing just more like light focused things. So this was a moment where Robert Redford's character was in an underground parking garage, and it was just, again, a moment when you see the lights, and I just love the sort of like superstructure was all there. So that leads into these pieces. Are the one on the left on the black paper is my own created lens flare. It was probably like an amalgam of a few stills that I had grabbed from feature films. And, so there you see like overlapping octagons and 6-sided and double-sided things. And so that's where that comes from. So that's silkscreen. And then on the right was the simplicity of the letterpress lockup. You see the square in the center. Literally, the arrows that are there are set up on the margin of a perfectly made square that you just use for letterpress printing. And it just kind of dawned on me that these negative spaces were kind of perfect for creating. So just the simple stuff.
Yeah, it makes me think a lot about the art world's been obsessed with the frame, like context, and context is more important than the subject sometimes. And I feel like this riffs on.
Every time I look back at old work, I even found some etchings that I made, of course, that I was trying to get so outside of the frame that I did the classic, like I inked the 4 edges of a copper plate and was printing blank, other than in the burnished zone. There'd be sort of a green for the ground and sort of a blue for the sky. It was like sort of funny.
I mean, as the viewer, I feel like I insert my own, I project like subjects into these.
Of course. Yeah, I love that too. Like there's always a space that's kind of being left for something else to happen.
Yeah, and some of these are these look like they're all different techniques, right?
Yeah, I mean they're mostly either silkscreen or letterpress, like depending on like the year. I have certain times when I've shifted and done all smaller sort of squarish letterpress pieces, and then when I'm allowed the time, I kind of expand and make some larger silkscreen pieces maybe.
Is this Dieudonné?
Yeah, this was on some Dieudonné paper, and I actually was an intern there a long time ago. When some of my first experience in New York was an internship there, and so they included me every year when they'd have the benefit show. And so I always got these beautiful paper samples and made prints for their benefits. And then they usually gave you enough paper, you could make a couple extras. So this is kind of one of the leftovers that I was playing around with light and shadow. Yeah, and then we get to this was another piece that I inserted into the talk just to kind of give you the gateway into some of the paintings and things that I've made. But this is just an inspiration, an artist. If you don't know him, you should probably know him. I'm always astonished at how much the work changes from show to show, but there's always a similar kind of vibe through his work. Wade Gaytan is his name, if you don't know his stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like someone who really pushes things with the, the idea of reproduction and a lot of the issues in artwork made in the age of mechanical reproduction, really kind of pushes through that and makes fun of it and plays with the idea of, something that's been printed and then just made again, famously sort of messed with those collectors who, when one of his pieces was up at auction, he started making another one. It was supposed to be a unique object, and he started making another one.
Yeah.
And then actually pushed the price of his object up during the auction, which, was a
bidder calling. Yeah, and great happy accidents. I think I saw these for the first time in one of the biennials, and I just kind of fell in love with such precision that could also be included right next to such like accidental things happening, and he just blurs the lines between what you're looking at. And I loved, again, like it's being able to flip something and have it mean something else, even though it's in a single piece. There's that dichotomy. So that was the Gaytan was actually kind of the inspiration for this. This is just I call them simple all the time, but this was just like a simple photograph that I took of a little section of my wife's dress that had just like where she had been seated at the stripe pattern. There was a larger stripe and a smaller stripe, just where it had overlapped and folded. And so these are just really, this in particular is a very small oil painting. And I suppose that I don't know, it's maybe a printing gimmick a little bit to use the rainbow roll. I guess it was, again, the challenge of using the little tiny brushes. I'm one of those 000 kind of painters that I love those little brushes. And I just did a blend with a 000 brush. It was like a challenge or something. I don't know. Printmaking stuff always kind of creeps back in. So it's the challenge of that. And then just a very simple one color pattern printed over top of it. And then you'll see the next slide is actually the printed version of that painting. And so again, like same thing I've sort of been doing since my undergraduate show. I actually had a group of paintings, and then I had prints that were based off the paintings, kind of always having a conversation between the two to see what would happen. So this is a relief print that my wife actually printed. She's a master printer in Mayshore. Mad props, Shore Publishing. She was able to make this print come to life. And then this is, again, like, I suppose if you want to riff for another second on Gaytan, these are actually little pieces of lead type that are the labor that's involved with typesetting this. Even just if you look how there's sort of 3 columns of information that are happening there, just in a slight axis point. Each time you set up the column to print is as many hours of work to get it straight and printing correct and where you want it, and all the registration, all these things that printmakers are worried about. And so even the simplicity of this print, it was actually quite difficult to move the lead into these positions. They're little tiny arrows. They all have finish points where they're tight and sharp and slightly wider. They're like maybe 2 point to 1 point little lead types. Pieces.
Wow, actually really tough. This paper kind of, it looks like basically what I'm getting at is this looks like some of your tattoos. Brad has a very, very super disparate and unique tattoo situation. That's amazing.
It is, I guess it is a little bit like that. Yeah, a lot of those kind of tight pieces.
And Bridget Riley.
Yeah, and who's not inspired by Bridget Riley? I mean, she's still going. She came to RISD, actually. I got to meet her when she came and talked, and I've just always loved her work.
Yeah, op art is one of those seductive forms, and so simple, but so much going on. It's
I know I'm such a sucker for it, and sometimes I feel a little funny about it. I'm like, I'm making a print with dots and I'm manipulating the dot, and but for me, like the creativity part is the making, you know, and after it's made, I have the release of having made it. I'm the follow through part I don't have to worry about. So it's still a joy to make. So this is Bridget Riley, and then here's another small painting, another one of those, you know, 000 brushes, and so this is a little section of a snapshot again of an artist that I was working with, a shirt she was wearing, and it was just the coolest thing, and it had all these slightly overlapping patterns, and I was able to snap a quick photograph of it kind of in movement. And so I actually paint all of the overlaps, both the colors and the overlaps. So this was like a year in the making, this little tiny thing. This is like 8-inch by 8-inch paintings.
It's great.
Moments there.
Oh, this was an earlier one, or when was this?
This was yeah, maybe I moved the order of it or something, but this was also just this is a recycled letterpress print that I used this sort of box grid for someone else, and then I based this off of a print that I did when I was still in grad school, where there's a focal point and things are sharp, and then as they move outward they seem to be sort of twisting, and again, like something's happening on the margin that doesn't happen in the center.
Yeah, the center is sort of there's less going on. The margins are super exciting. You have like these like interesting cuts on the two corners where you have 45-degree cut.
Yeah, you know, like when we all are, I mean, I don't know how many people in this class are like printmakers through and through, but we have a thing where we are you guys all printmakers? Am I just like throwing out all this funny printmaking terminology? I thought so. Where you are actually taking the paper and you'll shuffle it various times of the day, or you'll take it after you have a group of prints and as you begin to gather the prints, you start to see along the edges, there's these beautiful patterns that form. And so this is me sort of making it look like you have a stack of boxes that have been gathered and they're not quite stacked. And for me, it kind of I guess the corner cutting was just a suggestion of things still needing to be straightened. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's again when I've done this before in works, and when they go to like a framing part, it actually makes an interesting thing happen where if you put it in the frame slightly twisted, it can kind of suggest something else. And then this is just kind of like a study for a painting. Again, another extra piece of Dieudonné paper, and I've gotten more into using gouache. So this is kind of a gouache study for what would be partially a painting. And you know that like with gouache, it's harder you get these easy flowing areas literally of color, and then when you go to printmaking, sometimes it's so stencil and flat. So I'm trying to looking at this just reminds me to always be varying the ink. I think it's things you do when you're working with artists where you realize the smallest variance, especially like something like screen printing, for however many of you do screen printing, it makes all the difference, just the small things.
So you mentioned working with other artists. You have a lot of work. You've done a lot of work with other artists, I would say.
Yeah.
You founded Marginal Editions a little over 10 years ago, right?
Yep, 2007, kind of like officially. I had another press name and actually made some work early on when I was in Brooklyn, and then Marginal was established in 2007.
What made you want to start Marginal Editions?
You know, I think it's just like you and I, to use like the analogy, you have projects that you want to make, and I love your work, and so I'm happy to have you use the equipment and come in with your ideas, and we collaborate. So I think the more that I became a printer in New York, the interesting thing is you can begin to get people that want to work with you, either just as a contract printer, where you're just being paid to make something and you're taking their suggestions, or you're actually working with an artist who's there in the studio with you, and you can really put their suggestions right to the practice. They're at the press with you. So yeah, so that's kind of like, I guess, where it came from. I collaborated a lot as I was even still in grad school, and working with, and still as a, you know, like you, we teach, and so we collaborate with our students all the time.
Mm-hmm. And so who is this?
So this is Sterling Ruby, who's a kind of a cross-discipline artist. I think of him mostly as a sculptor, but I actually was, I loved his works on paper probably first, before I even knew his ceramics or anything else he was doing. So I guess I didn't put his name. Maybe I don't have some of the marginal artists. I don't have their names up here. I put them up here for the contract printing. Yeah, look up Sterling Ruby. His work it crosses all kinds of lines and is really interesting. And then Grayson, you know Anna pretty well, right?
Yeah, Anna Canal.
Mm-hmm.
She's an architect, and super interesting architect, working professionally, but doing her own projects, and then also making paintings, and then has done a series of prints with you, right?
Yeah, I'm not actually sure. I guess maybe through our mutual friend Mike, I was introduced to her, and I just knew that she had a really good design sense, and I know she had an amazing sense of humor, and she's really smart. This is before she was, before she went off to architecture school and everything. And so these are funny that they have a lot of architectural reference to them, but this is years before that. So.
Well, I know she was making a lot of paintings that they were of like decrepit, broken down motels on like Route 66 out west, where she was painting. She would take pictures of them and then make paintings of them where she brought them back to life. And so they looked fresh and new in the paintings, and they're really nice paintings. So they're really funny thinking about.
I forgot about the earlier reference. The paintings are earlier references than these are even. So
I think so.
Yeah, and we made a few letterpress pieces together that were like almost like maybe one or two were found pieces that we just inked and printed, and then she started carving blocks, and she made this into a little portfolio of these three pieces came in a portfolio, and she carved all the type, and unless I'm mistaken, this was all found type that were on motels as she went on a road trip across the country. I don't know how much of this is like 100% what she found, but she was documenting and working with the type from the signage.
That's great.
It's good.
On here.
And then yeah, this is the artist Eric Hogan, and he's now actually he's the master printer at the Lower East Side Print Shop. He's a Pratt alum, so Scott, maybe you were familiar with Eric back in the day, but Eric was in the grad program at Pratt, and that's where I met him. And Eric and I actually have done a lot of projects together. He's helped me a lot with making work with Marginal. And so this is one of Eric's portraits of another artist, a painter that he was working with. And this was made sort of a classic Eric style. He approaches things at the time anyways, all from CMYK standpoint. And so this is a multicolor linoleum block, all printed CMYK, all on the letterpress. And so it's pretty complicated, but great. I love how the portrait came out. And I guess I saw later in the lecture we talked more about Glenn Baldridge, but if you guys, if you know Glenn Baldridge, he's a Brooklyn-based artist. And this is just, I never quite know what to say about this, except that I know that at one point, at least on the East Coast, there was the purple drink craze. So this is like where this comes from for him. It's kind of a gag on on like the certain kind of partying that people were doing. I guess the certain Robitussin became popular for people to purchase and party and drink with. And anyway, so this is a 2-color letterpress piece, and Glenn's just kind of an incredible printmaker and a painter, and he has a great gallery here in New York that he's now doing all kinds of beautiful marble paintings and still working with text occasionally as well.
Yeah,
and,
a lot of those the paintings that say "No way,"
mm-hmm.
no way. They're really interesting paintings.
A lot of psychedelia, and yeah, I guess this kind of, there's a connection there, definitely.
The other on a canal.
Yeah, so this is another on a canal. This is probably maybe even the first one we did. I can't remember the order of things, but this is a very simple print. You guys can see the red there is just a 1-color carved wood block, and then I actually have this font in lead, and it was just sort of like a celebratory flag, honorable mention sort of gag that we printed. It ended up actually using gold leaf, like we gold leafed this. So that was fun. And I put these two back to back. You'll see there's 2 prints here. If you don't know the work of Esther Partagas, you should definitely know her work. Look up Esther. Her last name is Partegas, Partagas. I love her. She's just kind of a brilliant sculptor, and I worked with her, I guess probably at least 5 years ago on the second piece, the airplane piece. Both of these are again, this is like the past and the present. It's actually a digital print. It's a photograph. And then on top of that were all these labels that were completely handmade and hand printed and hand weathered. And so all the shipping labels between both this and the previous piece, the sort of dirt road windshield that you're looking through, all the labels that are stuck on here are all handmade. So those are all silkscreen and letterpress to match the original. She gave me the original. They were scanned, plates were made, screen printing was done, and then they're all sort of torn and cut and scratched apart.
It really works to go the distance for simple things in printmaking.
Yeah, these are very convincing, especially in person. And the best thing is that I've shown these a few times, and people get right up close to them and are looking at the labels through the glass, and they're just sort of like, what the fuck is this? Yeah. Which I love that reaction, actually. So it takes me a while to get through what it is so that they can understand it.
I feel like that's a common goal of printmaking sometimes is like fooling and playing and joking.
Yeah. There's a thing there, because what do? We all are trying to, like, we have a quick list of breaking down the image to describe how it was made. Did they cheat it? Did they do it well? Is it, we have this kind of lingo when we look at other people's prints that they've made. So that's one of those ones that's really like, what is this?
Yeah.
And this is Matt Keegan. We did a whole series of other tight pieces too, including we did a small run of pieces that are really that apply for today, but they're work from home. We did all these work from home pieces. We made these like 10
years. Brilliant, right? Like, especially why are we commuting,
Yeah, so he had made some large pieces at Dieudonné and some smaller lead tight pieces, and this is just a lead tight piece that we did. And he works a lot with language and image and kind of like where those two things cross and things that have double meanings. And I love Matt's work too. And this is Florian Meisenberg. For anyone that's interested, like especially for those of you that watched the other night when Grayson and Hollis did their monothon, this is essentially kind of this artist Florian Meisenberg's thing when he and I have worked together, at least on this series. I just gave him the screen printed Photoshop desktops, like blank desktops, which is really fun. And then he took a whole stack with him back to his studio and just mono printed and spray painted them. And airbrushed and oil painted and did his own thing. So it's a unique edition. There's probably 10 of them and in the edition, and it's just kind of a beautiful thing. He makes a lot of beautiful video. If you've never seen his video work, a lot of it you can just find on YouTube. There are these incredible moments, clarity, either in New York or even, like on the subway. He's always filming things and things that happen. So it was this kind of nice crossover between his video work and us doing something on paper that reminded me of his crossover work that he makes.
Amazing.
Yeah, and Alex Dodge is a painter primarily. He's Brooklyn based, and it's funny because a lot of his work, if you've looked at his work before, is very colorful and very bold and very bright. But I was always kind of first drawn to these quieter newspaper pieces that I think the first time I saw them maybe at NADA a few years ago. And they sort of looked like he had taken pieces of chipboard, the gray backing board that you see on the backs of sketchbooks, and people use it in bookbinding. And it was always like he had taken it and spray painted it and cut it with an X-Acto and laser cut it and had just kind of destroyed this chipboard. It just had these this worked quality. And so we ended up collaborating on this together. Again, like Eric Hogan's, this was a CMYK process, also printed on the letterpress. And this was, it's very newsworthy. Obviously, it's the cover of the New York Times, but this was the cover from the Khashoggi killing that happened. So he sort of captured that moment, and it's a very thoughtful piece. We did a very small edition of these, and I love that it kind of like it was so current, obviously, but was still like a quiet moment and wasn't like the other things that he's making. Yeah, he's a great artist.
Oh, and this is the Matt Keegan suite, right?
Yeah, this, and I think the next image, maybe if you go, yeah. So this was just to sum this up. This was like an amazing show for Matt because he actually had a 2-person show with the artist Anne Truitt, who's no longer living, but he was able to work with the estate and have one of her pieces all the way on the left there as the centerpiece of his show. So that was sort of like the altar, and it was like kind of an oversized pedestal, if you will, but you can see it looks like it's kind of floating off the ground. It has like an inset structure on the bottom that Grayson's probably really good at
I'm
making.
a fan of
And just like a subtle color change on the bottom kind of lifted it. It looked like it's floating in the space. And then behind it, in the center of the actual show, there were all these 4x8 sheets of drywall that Matt had gone through and had hand cut with blades, this pattern into them that you're seeing. And so what you're actually seeing now is all the 4x8 walls that surrounded Anne Truitt's work to scale. And so you're seeing these 4x8 pieces as a small letterpress print. They're actually, in real life, they're like maybe 17 by 6 inches. They're thin and tall to mimic the 4x8 to scale. And then those are laser cut paper pieces that have been screen printed that are hanging on the walls as they were in the show. So you're kind of seeing a reconstruction of Matt Keegan's show, but to a little scale. You can see the whole show. So if you go back one slide, you can see there's sort of the packaging for it. So you get a box with, including Anne's piece, and then all of the rest of the show, and it's all letterpress printed and screen printed in a beautiful box, actually.
Yeah, Anne Truitt has a really wonderful book called Day Book. I think that's the title, which I've read. I really love it. If anyone's interested, it's like her life as an artist. It's really, really great.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so we're at this show that you did, at Foxy Production in Manhattan. December, 10 Marginal Years.
Seems like so long ago now because it was 2018, but it was right at the very end, and it was like it was basically a 10-day show. It got extended a little bit due to popularity, Grayson.
Due to popularity. So this is the, maybe we stream through this.
Yeah, you can, whatever speed feels good. These are framed pieces, including, you can see Grayson's, you can see tiny versions of Esther there, and Alex, things that we just were speaking about.
Oops. Some print.
Portfolio.
Flat. This.
So, yeah, this is a screen print by Sasha Browning. And this was a print that I was really aiming to get finished for the 10 Marginal Year shows. And I literally just got it done about 2 days, this edition before the show. So I was really happy to have this be in the show.
And what was this print about? Can you remind me?
I mean, I don't actually, I know that a lot of her, she's a painter primarily, but has also she's been making sculptures and things recently, small editions of things, but a lot about the body. I don't know, if necessarily they're portraits when she's making her paintings, but this is a motif that she's gone back to a few times. She does these sort of profile witches that she's done as paintings. This was based off of a gouache painting that she actually made that I had in the studio a little bit to sort of match from. But the more that I looked at the painting, it was sort of the simplicity of paper dolls and cutting, and once things are folded out, because you really do see, it's maybe hard to see in this slide necessarily, but the second pair of legs that sort of jet up, there's 2 pairs of red legs there. There are these subtle shadows that are printed there, from like the hips out, where you see almost like an overlapping of 2 sets of legs. And the more that I was working on the print, it became so dimensional sitting flat. It's hard it's weird. When you face it, it sort of flattens out and looks very stencily like you see here. But when it's sitting down and you're looking at it sort of 3/4 perspective, it actually looks like the legs are sitting folded, like folded cut paper. And so it kind of completed the piece, having it be completely bisected and with these shadows. So it was weird for me. It was like a weird bridge between some of her paintings, and because she's very illusionistic and painting light and shadow, and actually some of her sculpture, like her sculptural pieces. So
you can see it there in the show.
You can see it sort of central. Some of the other pieces we talked about. And there's Matt's complete portfolio. And then beautiful tables.
Beautiful table.
By Grayson. Grayson assisted me in the show immensely, building some tables for display. This is what we do. We made a project together.
We have found that if you want to see your friends, you must work together, because all
Exactly right. And then so these are, you can see on the left there, it's hard to see, but there's Glenn's Robitussin piece on the wall there.
Oh.
Hey, now we're at Grayson's work.
So I've done a couple prints with Brad, and this was the very first print that we did together, which is based on those Delftware plates that are kind of souvenirs. And they, usually with these blues and white plates that you buy, and then people show them in their house or whatever. I was thinking about the plate, and also like a window from a boat or a plane or something like that. And this focuses on the Royal Caribbean cruises, and how people would come to a new island and get off the boat and go on to the island for a couple of hours, and be sort of stuck in these tourist trap zones where the locals come in, park their car, and come in and introduce the culture to these people for a very short amount of time, and sell them things, and how this is a kind of nowhere space, where it doesn't actually represent the culture. Um,
And that's the moment where you cue the Billy Ocean Caribbean Queen right there.
yeah, so if we could just overlay that.
Caribbean Queen. Okay.
And this is another project Brad and I did for, it was during a show I had called The Water's Fine, and it was dealing with power dynamics and power in the family. And these are photos of plants that have been in their pots too long that I asked my mom to take. And so she went to a big box store and found these plants and photographed them. And Brad and I made, this is a one layer of silkscreen for a kind of ghostly soul that exists under the photograph, which is more apparent in the one on the right. You can see this kind of discoloration. And so it's a three layer print with one layer of silkscreen, then letterpress, high res letterpress, and then silkscreen borders.
We did what you're not supposed to do, which I think gives them kind of an interesting surface. We printed water-based silkscreen, and then the letterpress that's on there is like rubber-based ink, and so they do have these surfaces that have different sort of light senses of light depending on how directionally where you're looking at it from.
And then this is a show that we worked on together with artist Nadia Frank, which was a big collaboration. And this is a painting on the right that I made that has a sculptural frame. And this black rock in the background is an artwork sculpture by Nadia Frank. And this light sculpture is a sculpture by Nadia Frank. And this chair sculpture is a sculpture by me. And then on the left, you can see this atmospheric wall painting that Nadia and I did together that created a kind of setting. And this on the back wall is a print published by Marginal Editions by Nadia Frank and I together. And see, these are some of the pieces in the show. The show is called Self-Checkout. This is a life-size self-checkout machine that printed on rubber and that I made with at Brandex Publishing, which is another printmaking place, because they can do very large scale screen printing.
You single-handedly made self-checkout a thing before the pandemic.
Yeah. There's some details of the machines there on rubber. This is oil-based silkscreen, which is really crazy and toxic. And this is the print that we all collaborated on with Nadia Frank. And these are cutouts. This is a cutout window in this paper, and behind it is another piece of paper, a photograph of Mars, and we made it buffering. And then this is a cutout piece of paper that makes up this brighter screen on the phone. So this is silkscreen and letterpress.
I love this piece. I don't know how this collaboration, like how this really all came together, but I love that I love just the buffering aspect of it all. Not only is the second Mars picture in a picture buffering, but you have literally like no guide to this snow landscape that you're faced with. It's like, oh, you can feel the treacherousness of the image.
I always love collaborating because there's this opportunity for this kind of 1 + 1 = 3 kind of situation. And, you know, this print would have never existed without the collaborative, you know, spirit of the three of us. It's a very great object. And these are silicone iced coffees. They're fake iced coffees that I made for the show that are kind of coming in. That was a beginning point for work that I'm now doing. And this is a sculpture I made to facilitate one of those coffees, a kind of ridiculous sculpture. And so that leads us to this print that we did just before I left town, literally on March 11th, I think we were signing and finishing this print.
Yeah.
Which is called FaceTime because it seemed appropriate. And this was a highly collaborative print by Brad and I. It was Brad's idea from the beginning. and then we developed laser cut wood blocks
Mm-hmm.
for the mirror coffee, and then hand cut over a long period of time all of the other external parts. And so we have this kind of iced coffee looking in the mirror, or iced coffee doing a Zoom call or a FaceTime call.
Yeah, and for those and for the print geek lovers, try the whole reason that this stayed with me for so long before we could finally make it was purely printing metallic silver on an offset paper. We're all so used to using all these cotton papers for all the screen printing and all the stuff that we're using. Go get yourself a cheap roll of offset printing paper and try printing some glossy or metallic inks on it. You just, the kind of look that it had, as soon as I saw how mirrored actually the finish became, I knew I could just picture Grayson looking into this mirrored surface, and it just felt right. So that's why I wouldn't let him not make this print with me.
Amazing. And so I want to get to talk. We don't have that much time, but Brad has done a lot of contract printing as well, and I want to just discuss the relationships you have with people. So why?
Mm-hmm.
What are the different things that motivate you to make prints? What are the different things that motivate you to collaborate with people? And how does contact printing fill in, or like work out for you? And why do you do it? And please give your answer while I go unlock the door for a student to grab something.
Okay. I guess one of the reasons that, I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, for those of you that are especially as you're getting closer to school ending, you're going to be faced with you have to figure out a way to make some money. And so part of it was relationships that I had established with some galleries that needed some printing and artists that maybe could afford to pay for something. And so I did a lot, I guess, sort of in the spirit of, I'll do some printing for your gallery as a kind of a show card sort of thing. And then maybe eventually when we have some real time, I could work with your artist if you're interested in working with me, and we could make a collaborative print, and your artist can have some and you as the gallery can have some and I can have some. So it kind of like, that's as simply as it started out. A lot of the stuff that you're seeing here that's passing by are maybe more later on down the line, where I was actually just being paid to make the work, I guess, because I'm out there as a commercial printer, contract printer for some people, and for shows and things, but also for people just to have editions made. And so these prints here are sort of some of that, and some of that are things that are just an exchange of money. But I love a lot of the ones that are more local to people that I sort of know, even by proxy. They're just made sort of for the love of it. And of course we want to try to sell too, but collaborative printmaking sometimes is just to like make the project. You can see like for each one of these, there's kind of a story behind them, but I think mostly these artists, they all bring their own experience as painters or sculptors, and they all have their approach. And I just love to hear and see for the first time how they bring that physicality into either screen printing or letterpress. And so you can get as physical with it as you can get, I think, with the sculpture. Sometimes you just have to like harness that artist's kind of focus into making it and knowing that it's going to be on paper. So you're seeing like some portfolios here, and yeah, some of it's contract printing, but also some of it are artists that I was encouraging them to make the print deeper and further and a few more layers of color and make it really like pop the way you envision it being like your finished piece without me here. So
So you have a lot of input. I mean, there's like, even when it's a contract print, you're still, it's highly collaborative. You're still like saying, no, there's this one ink you could use to do X, Y, Z, right?
Yeah, I mean, that you sort of lead them down that path, and as they know that they can push it further and further. It's like, you know, working with you, it's like you have you know, you have your things that you kind of go to and utilize, but there's always like another step ahead that you're thinking about, and I guess sort of my job is to prompt that and be like, well, okay, so this maybe doesn't fit into the current body of work, but if it's something you want to make just to kind of get it out of your system, what do you want to do for that? And maybe from jumping off point, we don't have to use kind of standard papers, and maybe we can think about how we can get the silk screen to be dimensional or have a slight color change, or things that your eye can only notice and that maybe, you know, you won't see passing by the first time, but if it's lit correctly, or, you know, things like that that I think about. I think it's my study of light and how I make my work and how I'm trying to make it transform before your eyes. I'm trying to make it shift. It's the same thing I bring to the artist. It's like it can be two things at once.
So I'm curious if anyone has any questions now, or if there's, where we have a whole, in this group, we've been having a conversation. We had a great conversation last week about dispersal and about how our value systems can kind of go into the way in which art leaves us or enters into a community, and how those the decisions to, for, you know, issues around presentation, issues around who these works are for, the audience, those values can kind of, if you can think about those from the beginning, they can kind of guide a project.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anyone here that would like to ask any questions or go deeper on our conversations around dispersal?
I know there's questions. So many questions. Don't be scared.
My sense is that, you know, some of the things that we were talking about last time, you know, had to do with the audience that we want to enter. Like, how can you decide? I mean, this is a question for you, Brad. Like, how can you decide how many prints to make when you're making an edition? Like, how do you set the number? What is that based on?
I mean, I think it's from just the experience of making a lot of prints and making a lot of, yeah, I mean, you make the decision with the artist. Mostly, I think that I have kind of a respect for the artists that want to get into prints and make prints, but are not thinking beforehand like we have to make a certain amount to sell a certain amount to make this kind of money back. It's like the financial part of it is like just another thing. And so, you know, you do, like, as a collaborative printmaker, you just kind of have to get there and discuss it. I think it's smarter to always have less is more, you know, because I don't think any one of us that has a full shop with full flat files from all the years that we've all been doing this, we don't have technically we just don't have the space to make maybe as many as, of course, we would love to make more. But I think it's smarter to make a fair amount, and, you know, some people are going to want them, and then you're always going to have a few to look back at over the years if someone's interested in them 10 years from now. That's great.
And does that happen? I mean, like, do people come looking for things you did a long time ago?
Yeah, you know, I mean, inevitably as a printer, the works, like these prints you're seeing here, are on various websites, and so I'll get contacted by an art space or somebody like that has found an image online, or maybe they're sort of like, my client would like, you know, a print by this artist, do you still have it in stock, kind of a thing. And it's like, well, yes, I still have it in stock. I have probably 10 impressions, and it's just you know, since this is COVID time, I mean, I have that happening right now. There was a purchase that was made of a print, a Will Boone print that was made of, I don't know, 2 years ago, and Art Space let me know that somebody just bought it, you know. And so what do? I just made sure I let the company know that's great news. I have the print, of course. It's for sale, yes. And I don't know when I'm going to be able to ship it. And so, you know, like that's something that I'm running into right now. But it's great. You know, people contact saying, do you still have your first Sacha Browning print that you made 6 years ago? And I'm, you know, most of the artists I know I still have a few prints from. Yeah, it all ends up working out. There's a few things that have actually sold out, like you flipped past the Derek Adams there, the deck of cards, really elaborate screen print and gold foil gold leaf, and those are like impossible to get now. And I did have a set of them, and you know, it's always sad to sell them, but sometimes somebody emails me out of the blue and they're interested in purchasing them, and it's a good time, maybe financially, if you have the set and you don't have a lot of other contract printing going on. It's sad, but you know, it's part of what we do as printers.
And that's what like sort of builds an ecosystem, right? I mean, you have some prints that are selling like wildfire, and those pay for the production of other things that you're doing.
Exactly.
And you're able to continue that way, right? I mean,
every print, honestly, that sells, all I can think is, great, now I have this production of this portfolio I really want to make with this group of artists. It could at least start that off. I can afford to buy the paper for X, Y, and Z. So yeah, that's like 100% that happens to keep the money flowing back in. As if you get a little bit of it, it's like, great, I can get like a couple $100s worth of paper and I'm ready to start something new. I have a few projects that have basically gone on hold for COVID, but a couple for the Queens Museum and another edition that needs to be made. I'm just excited to get back to it. So, you know, I'm lucky that people want the print services still. It's hard, you know, the previous crash, a lot of people that wanted things printed in 2009 in New York, it kind of went away overnight, and I was a little nervous, but I guess we're going to see how things go in the next few months here. But luckily I still have some projects in the works, and I think my boss, Leslie Miller, who runs Grenfell Press, the space that I work out of in Manhattan, she's big into kind of like the idea that when things are tough and financially things are rough and you don't have the money coming in necessarily, that's kind of like the time to publish and push yourself. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Good words to leave it on.
Yeah.
I think we're out of time fully. So thanks a lot, Brad, for
Thanks for having me.
Um,
Thanks so much for having me.
yeah, well, I can't wait to work with you again someday.
Yeah, stay safe, everybody, and good to see you, Scott.
Okay, thanks a lot, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.